Hi guys, it's Carla Lett here, the founder of My Bump2Baby, and I have some really exciting news for you guys. So I am going to be launching the ultimate blogging course, a course that is going to show you how to blog successfully online. Whether you're a mum that wants to earn a passive income online from the comfort of your own home and work around your family, or you might be a business owner that wants to bring more people to your website, whatever your blogging goals are, I can help you. And I want to share this course with you. My course is going to be launched on the 1st of the 11th, 2022. And the first 111 people to access my course and purchase it are going to get a jaw-dropping discount. If you are interested in finding out how to blog, then join my mailing list where I'll be sharing lots of free tips, tools, and training to support you on your blogging journey. So you can subscribe to my mailing list by heading to mybumptobaby.com/blog subscribe. The link should be at the bottom of this podcast. Really excited to see you over there. Hello and welcome to my Bump2Baby Expert podcast, where we bring experts from all over the UK to answer your questions on everything pregnancy to preschool. Hello everybody and welcome to my Bump2Baby's Expert podcast. Today I am joined by Nicola Bright, partner at Meyerson Solicitors in Altrincham, and today we are talking about consent to fertility treatments. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hello everybody and welcome to my Bump2Baby's Expert podcast. Today I am joined by the lovely Nicola Bright, partner at Meyerson Solicitors in Altrincham. Hello, Nicola. How are you?
Hello. Oh, thanks for having me. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm really good, and I'm looking forward to this subject because my Bump2Baby, this subject that we're going to be talking about today is consent to fertility.
Yeah.
And my Bump2Baby writes a lot of articles around trying to conceive, and I, for one, know that just because you've had a smooth sailing pregnancy the first time around and you've got pregnant quite quickly, the second time can be quite different, third
Yeah.
time can be quite different again. So obviously we live in an amazing world where there's so many things that people can do now in terms of fertility, which is just incredible. But there is, law issues around those
Definitely.
things, and you're the expert on this subject, so we're going to kick off with some questions for you, Nicola, if that's okay.
That's absolutely fine. Go ahead.
So what is the law surrounding fertility treatment?
So there's various legal provisions surrounding treatment. So we often advise individuals or couples and sometimes clinics on the law surrounding fertility treatment. So deciding to start a family is one of the most important decisions that anyone will make in life. So whilst, like you said, not all couples can conceive naturally, fertility treatments like IVF give people a really good chance to have a family. However, there is a caveat to that. I often advise people who before they start treatment, that process, I'll tell them it's really important to seek legal advice at an early stage on things like the consent to the fertility treatment. So most couples will obviously use a licensed fertility clinic within the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll get couples who go abroad, and then the legal provisions are slightly different. So for the purposes of today, I'll talk about couples who are going to treatment in this country.
Great.
Some couples don't realise that if they try and do what's called DIY insemination, you might have seen programmes on the TV about this, men who father hundreds of children by donating their sperm. I think there was a Channel 4 documentary about a year ago about this. I don't know if you saw it or not.
Yes.
So that can create a whole host of problems. So if, for example, you're using a donor for sperm on a DIY basis, you found someone online, there are websites for it, believe it or not, and you have no intention of that donor being part of a child's life, that is not what happens. So if you use a donor on that basis without going to a clinic, the sperm donor will be the legal father of the child when the child's born. So that person could, if he wanted to, ask for contact, ask for parental responsibility, make an application to the court. At the same time, he could be ordered to pay maintenance. So it creates this obligatory relationship between parents and then the responsibilities that a parent has. So it can be, if you don't go to a clinic, you could be in trouble.
Yeah, so I thought, I mean, this is me being naive here,
Mm.
that if he wasn't on the birth certificate, then
Mm.
that couldn't happen. So that actually someone could come forward and
Yeah,
say, actually,
yeah. And
so
how you get around that, if you were a father who donated, and you might have a situation, and you do get it a lot, where friends decide to enter into these sort of not co-parenting, but these sort of relationships where you might have a lesbian couple who haven't got obviously the sperm to use to conceive. They may have a friend who's willing to do it for them
Mhm.
and is saying to them, I'll do this for you on a donor basis. And they're thinking, okay, he doesn't want anything to do with the child. And then things change as soon as that baby's born. There's been a whole host of cases in the courts about this, where the father, he's the legal father, he's a biological father, has then changed his mind and then wants to be a part of that child's life. He can apply for what's called a declaration of parentage, which puts him on the birth certificate. He can then
Right.
apply for parental responsibility. He can then apply for contact and residence, and lots of different things that come with that. So you can apply for things like going on holiday with a child, Christmas contact. The list is endless.
Mm.
The legal battles are complicated, expensive, often fraught with, lots of cost implications. It can cost a fortune to hire barristers for these types of things. So yeah, it's quite common actually that people enter into these arrangements not realising the implications.
I can imagine that because I think when you see your friends and they're struggling, it's
Yeah,
so easy to kind of give them,
agreed.
yeah, give out
Yeah,
that, put that hand out
yeah.
there. And you don't really think about the
No,
future at the time.
no.
You just want your friends to feel better and you want to
Yeah,
solve the problems, don't you? And
yeah,
I suppose these are things that really, people need to think about before they
yeah.
enter in these agreements. Yes.
Yeah,
Um,
so it can be quite complicated. Just to contrast it with if a couple or a single person went to a clinic, so a
mhm.
regulated clinic, so they then had IVF or ICSI, whatever they needed to conceive, to contrast it in that situation, the woman who gives birth to the child is always going to be the legal mother. So she's always going to have the legal parent responsibility of that child when the child's born. And that's whether or not she used donor eggs, donor sperm, or both. Because she's gone through a clinic, she's the legal parent. If she's married or in a civil partnership, it's her husband or wife or civil partner who will be the other legal parent by law. So it's very simple. There is the donor of the sperm, for example, if they use donor sperm or donor eggs or both, is off the scene. They don't have any legal rights. It's the husband or the wife of that woman or the civil partner of that woman who will be the other legal parent by law. So it's quite simple if you
Wow.
go to a clinic.
If on, sorry to throw so many
No, it's
questions at you
okay.
there. It just sprung to mind surrogacy
Yes.
because
Yeah.
that's coming up a lot now.
Yeah.
You see the celebrities doing
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Kim
a lot.
Kardashian.
Yes, I noticed that the other day, and she's in a
Yeah.
hospital bed as well, bless her. So
Yeah.
yeah, I did see that picture. Which I just think whatever way you do motherhood is beautiful. I
Mm,
really do. And
mm.
but with the surrogacy side, how does that work for them then? Because as you said, if I've donated my eggs to someone
Yeah.
to carry the baby because I had a short cervix, so next
Yeah.
time if I did want another one, that might
Yeah.
be something that I would look at. Would
Yeah.
that person that had my eggs, they would be the legal?
So if you went through, you'd have to go through a clinic because you'd have to have the eggs inseminated. So it's not a case of the situation I was talking about before with donor. It's physically impossible, obviously, in this
Yes.
situation with surrogacy. So what happens then is the law. There's there's a whole host of other rules for surrogates which
Oh,
protect
sorry.
intended. No, it's fine. It's really simple to explain. So you're right in assuming that when the baby is born, the legal mother is actually the surrogate for a short time. However, you have to apply for a parental order. So the intended parents, say you and your partner, would apply for a parental order at that point to have all the legal rights transferred to you. So you then make the application, I think it's within 6 weeks of the child's birth, you make the application to court, and it's a special division of the court in London actually that deals with these applications. And there would be a welfare reporter who would just double check everything, visit you, visit the surrogate, check everything's not been, done correctly, there's nothing underhand. You've only paid her sort of reasonable expenses. That's another thing that's looked at, like the expenses, because surrogacy in the UK, like commercial surrogacy in the UK, is actually illegal. You can't pay someone to have a baby for you, but you can pay her expenses, and that's quite far reaching. You can even pay for her to go on holiday to recover from the birth. It's
Wow.
quite far reaching, but you do
Yes.
need to pay for. You need to show what you've paid for and show the expenses. So all that will get checked out. There'll be general welfare checks on everyone to check this was what was intended, that the child's in the right place. The child would go home with you after birth. It's just that the legal rights would need to be transferred by way of this order.
I
So
understand.
the law doesn't change on birth, doesn't give the intended mother the immediate legal rights, but because it's a surrogate situation, you're allowed to apply for a parental order quite soon.
Right.
Yeah,
Right, that's
yeah,
great. I think we've touched on quite a lot
yeah.
there,
No, it's
actually. I mean, it's good because
yeah, no,
anyone
it's really
listening to
interesting.
this, there's so many different options
Yeah,
nowadays, which
there
we are
is.
very lucky, aren't we? So,
Yeah.
so what is capacity? Because I've heard that before.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. So capacity in a legal sense is determination of to whether someone has or lacks the mental capacity to make a decision for themselves. So typically capacity would be lacking if someone was severely mentally ill or became disabled, had been in an accident, for example, brain damage. And the capacity would have to be determined by a medical professional. So lawyers can't determine capacity. We can have an idea about whether someone lacks capacity, and mostly common sense would dictate that. But really, we'd need a medical professional to determine whether someone lacks capacity or not. So in the sense of, in the context of fertility treatment, so at the start of fertility treatment, each person who goes for the treatment, so typically a couple, would be asked to declare what they would like to happen with their eggs or sperm or embryos if they died or became incapacitated at any point. So if the consent to the use of those eggs, sperm and embryos wasn't given by the person who then dies or becomes incapacitated, the clinic wouldn't be able to use them with the surviving or the non-incapacitated parent. So they would have to technically be destroyed. They wouldn't be able to use them. It's effectively like a withdrawal of consent to the use because they haven't explicitly provided the consent. The consent's not there. So the other person can't use them. The consents themselves have to be in writing and signed by the parents, the intended parents. But there are exceptions. So this is another example of how complex things can be. So there have been legal challenges to this principle. So I don't know if you remember a few years ago, there was a really big case and there was a lady called Diane Blood, and she fought a battle to conceive using her dead husband's sperm,
yes.
which had been collected without his consent after he got meningitis, but he was incapacitated. So the court in the UK decided that it was an infringement of her EU rights, EU law, to deny her the right to get the treatment elsewhere in Europe. So although they couldn't lawfully have the treatment in England with her husband's sperm, they allowed her to use it in Belgium where she was successful. So that I thought that was quite a good outcome.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a brilliant outcome for her. She's had a child since. So it can be challenged in certain situations. Obviously, that was a very tragic circumstance. He got meningitis. It wasn't
Bless him.
expected. Yeah. So
Oh, goodness.
yeah.
Yeah. And you
So
just
it
think,
can be challenged, but yeah, generally, if there's no consent, you've got an uphill struggle. So all the clinics that I work with, any regulated clinic should be getting this consent from both parents when they take any egg, sperm or make embryos out of that for the couple.
So if we've got people listening and they want to kind of ask you about these clinics that you work with, that
Mm,
would be okay. We'll pop your details at the end
absolutely,
of
yeah,
this.
that's
That's
fine.
that's great. What I'm gonna, sorry if this catches you off guard, but say for
It's okay.
example, a couple went for IVF,
Yeah,
and they were successful the first time. They've got eggs stored.
yeah.
If that couple then divorces,
Hmm.
but they have had the consent,
Yeah,
what would
they can
happen then?
withdraw it.
Right.
So they can withdraw the consent. So on separation, one of the couple may decide that they don't, and this does happen regularly.
Mm,
One of the couple may decide that they don't want their embryos or sperm or eggs using, and because it's a unilateral decision, there's nothing the clinic or the other person can do. They cannot be used. The consent to treatment is a dual consent, and if someone withdraws their consent to the future use of their frozen embryos or sperm or eggs, the other person can't do anything about it. So it can be quite sad.
mm,
But obviously that embryo is half theirs, and they naturally may not want it to be used.
of course.
Um, it's very difficult, and this does come up in divorce sometimes, and it is heartbreaking because sometimes you'll get perhaps the intended mother saying, well, I don't care if he's off the scene and divorcing me, I still want to have his baby. But if
Mm,
he's withdrawn his consent to the use of that embryo, she's in a very difficult position. She wouldn't be able to do anything about it. She
mm.
effectively could meet a new partner and have IVF with him and have new embryos created. There's nothing stopping that. But she wouldn't be able to use her previous husband's embryo, the embryos created with his sperm.
Right, okay.
So it is sad when that happens. It does happen regularly. And sometimes the couple might agree to donate their embryos in that situation, jointly
Oh,
donate. So although they can't use them together, they might say, well, we'll actually donate them so other couples can use them.
oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, so that can happen.
Oh, God, I feel
Yeah.
like I'm gonna cry. I
I
just
know.
think of those, but
I
oh, it's sad,
know.
isn't it?
It's really sad, but if something can come out of it, they can, rather than be destroyed, they can be donated.
Right. So
Yeah.
I suppose as well, it's for women, a lot of women, I mean, I
Yeah.
know I did it, worry about your age, don't you? I mean,
Yeah,
not
naturally.
that it matters as much now. I see a lot of older women like
Mm.
myself. Well, I say myself, how old am I? 36 nearly. But
Same as me. Not old.
compared to not old, we're not old, are we?
No.
But we classed as geriatric mums, aren't we,
I
really? But
know.
if we
We
went
are.
through the IVF process now with our partners, and
Mhm.
then we got a divorce from them in, say, 5, 10
Mhm.
years,
Mhm.
that then might be the embryos,
That you've used together, that you've
yeah,
created together.
and
Yeah.
then you're
'Cause
older, aren't you? And then
yeah.
it's
Yes, and you might have to start again with someone else,
mm,
or you might think to yourself, because as a single parent, you can go through IVF on your own. You don't need to go through IVF with someone else. You could go through IVF with and use donor sperm
mhm,
that way. Um, and make that decision, but you would be obviously the baby wouldn't have any genetic relationship with your ex-partner. It would be a donor. That's the
mm,
compromise, but you wouldn't be able to use the embryos that you'd created
yeah,
if he withdrew his consent at that point. But
mm,
embryos can be stored for up to 55 years, believe it or not,
wow,
with 10-year renewals in between. So typically 10 years, every time 10 years elapses, you have your renewal, but up to 55 years you can have embryos stored and
wow,
eggs and sperm. Yeah, it's a
oh
long
my
time.
goodness, wow,
Yeah,
that's incredible.
I know it is.
So, can fertility treatment still be given if they lack capacity? If someone
Um,
lacks capacity?
Generally, no, unless they became incapacitated after the treatment started and they'd already given that consent. So it may well be. So no. So the answer to your question, someone that lacks capacity wouldn't be able to have fertility treatment because they wouldn't be able to produce the required consents to the
Yeah,
treatment.
okay.
There could be an argument about the right to family life there, in terms of someone could argue on someone's behalf that that infringes on their right to family life, which is a human right, and that would be something that would have to be legally challenged potentially. by a human rights lawyer.
Mm.
If a couple start the treatment and they both have capacity, and then one of them becomes incapacitated after they've gone to the clinic but before the treatment started,
Mm-hmm.
and they've said that yes, you can use my sperm and eggs and whatever it embryos, whatever it is, then the person can go through the treatment, so to speak, if they've already donated, even though they lack capacity, as long as they've consented to it. So similar situation to what I explained before, as long as they've consented to their eggs and sperm or embryos being used at the point of instructing the clinic for help, and to say, look, we want to start IVF, even if the IVF hasn't actually started, and there's a tragic accident or something happens, and let's say it's the husband that's incapacitated, the wife can still go ahead and use his sperm or the embryos, whatever it is that they need, as long as he's written and signed the consent.
Oh,
So
gosh.
that's a bit like what happened with Diane Blood, only the consents weren't given, so she fought it in court and then won. In terms of not won, but she got the right to go to Belgium.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that it depends when they became incapacitated. It would be very difficult for someone who was incapacitated to make that decision with someone else to have IVF,
Of
just from
course.
from a legal point of view, because they if they are incapacitated to the point they can't make decisions for themselves, they can't make legal decisions for themselves. My
Mm.
view is that clinics would be quite concerned about taking them on as a patient.
Yeah. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah,
Goodness. So,
yeah.
um, any other fertility treatments that you think we've not made? I know we've mentioned quite a
Yeah, I
few
mean,
here.
the main
Um,
ones are IVF and ICSI, which is very similar. It's like an extra layer of treatment within the IVF process.
right. What about freezing
Hmm.
your eggs? You know,
Yeah,
what about that? Because there'll be some people listening to this podcast that have previous children.
yeah,
They might want more, but they haven't met the right person yet,
yeah,
or they don't want to do it yet. What's
yeah. So
the
you
law
can,
around that?
so anyone can freeze their sperm or their eggs. It's more common for women to freeze their eggs because eggs decline with age in terms of the quantity and the quality of them. So you get more women donating their eggs, sorry, not donating, freezing their eggs,
Yeah.
as opposed to men freezing their sperm. Um, it's a case of the individual going to a clinic, finding the right clinic for them. Obviously, everything comes with a cost. You have to pay for this, and there's an annual fee to have them stored as well.
Mm.
Um, in terms of storage of those, obviously they're retrieved, so you have to have an operation to retrieve your eggs, and then they're stored for up to 55 years with the 10-year renewal. So generally, people decide to freeze their eggs maybe when they're in their 30s and 40s,
Mm-hmm.
and with a view to using them within the next 10 years. So they're stored for that point. But if you get to the 10-year point and you need to renew for another 10 years, that's absolutely fine. Some people will freeze their eggs very young because perhaps they've had to have chemotherapy or something's happened to their health, and they might freeze very young. There's cases where in childhood and puberty, eggs are frozen because of perhaps cancer treatment that's
Mm.
coming up. So that can happen, and in which case that's why we need the extra years. 10 years isn't enough. You need to keep renewing because you might have quite a young person freezing their eggs, and you
Oh,
need a long time. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, freezing eggs is very common now. Lots of people do it. It's a great way of preserving your fertility. Lots of clinics encourage it. Lots of doctors I speak to encourage it. Um, it's usually when you get to the point of your egg reserve dropping that you think, oh, I really need to do something. But
Mm.
at least if you can retrieve a few eggs, the better. It's even better to try and freeze embryos. So if you
Mm.
have met someone, but you're not ready to have children, to freeze embryos is great because you know that those the viable ones, will be ready to implant when you're ready. Whereas with the eggs, you've got to then get through the whole process of them being viable and matched with sperm, and then embryos being viable from them eggs. So sometimes you might freeze 20 eggs, but only 10 of them will turn into embryos, and perhaps only 5 of them will be viable. So it's better to freeze embryos if you can, but that might not be possible if you've not met someone. So lots of people do freeze their eggs.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize that there was the two different options there. Yeah, that's really good. And
Yeah,
sorry, so another
it's
question that
okay.
sprung to mind now is what happens then, say someone's froze embryos or eggs, and
Mhm.
if in 20 or 30 years, is there an age limit that they can't have them back inside, back in their own body, or how does
Not
that
as I'm
work?
not that I'm aware of. I think clinics will advise it will that the if it was embryos or eggs, well, embryos would have to be created to be inserted back into a woman.
Yes.
If they would have to do full assessments of her from a medical point of view to see whether it was viable, because obviously the older you get, the harder it is to have the embryo implant into your womb, and all these sort of more complicated things can arise with birth the older the woman is. So it might be that the clinic would advise against it if you had someone over a certain age. But people are getting older and older, having Eva Longoria is 50, isn't she, and she's just had successful IVF. It's just incredible. So it's getting more common.
Definitely. I
um
think we're spring chickens, aren't we, really, the way you
exactly.
think of it?
Yeah.
But it is true. I mean, you also, I mean, I'm seeing more and more. I say older. I don't even
Mm.
consider these people
No,
really older at all, but it's great to see, really,
it
because
is. Yeah.
I can totally understand it. And God, I wasn't ready for children when
No.
my mum had my brother. I think she was around 21. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been ready
I
at that
know. It
age.
seems to be it's generational. My parents were the same, and it's just it doesn't happen now. The amount of
No.
people that I know that have children, even in their 20s, I can't even count on one hand.
No.
It doesn't happen, does it? And most people are older.
They are now.
35, 40, 40 plus, that's quite common.
Mm,
Lots of my friends who have got toddlers are in their 40s, and everyone's in the same boat. No one sort of says classes them as old parents.
no.
It's just the way we are now. People focus on their careers, and
Yeah.
affordability of houses. It's just not the
Oh,
same as it was in the 70s and 80s. It's so different. It's so hard and even harder now than when I even bought a house. It's so difficult
oh.
to get on the ladder.
Oh, exactly. Especially
Yeah.
with these blooming heating bills.
Oh, I
You know,
know. And
it's
mortgage
just,
rates. Yeah.
oh, I know, it's
So
crazy.
hard. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really
So when
is.
they get older, the age may push back and back because people are focusing on their finances, career, feeling, they've got to feel ready for starting a family.
Yeah.
It may be that we see trends that, there are when the Office of National Statistics gets released next, it may be that parenthood's the average age of parents have gone up again.
Yeah.
It wouldn't
Yeah.
surprise me at all.
No, me neither. And I think you just have to do what's best for you, don't you? No matter what
Exactly.
age, if you're ready,
Yeah.
you're ready.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's why egg freezing is great, because you can use that to your advantage.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
That is brilliant.
Mm.
I know it's really really interesting actually because I've got quite a few friends that are really quite interested in that, and it is really
Mm.
clever how
It
how
is.
how science has come about now.
It
So
is.
so Nicola, will you tell everybody how they can find you? And I
Absolutely.
will pop all Nicola's links underneath this podcast.
Yeah, so you can either Google, so if you Google my name and Myerson Solicitors, I'll probably come up quite quickly, because we've got quite a good website out there, or you can just go straight to myerson.co.uk and then go to the family team, and I'll be on there as well. And then you can pop my details at the end of this, and my email will be on there, my phone number. So anyone can contact me about any fertility law related questions or surrogacy. Just pick up the phone. We can offer a no obligation consultation over the phone at any point. Just give me a call. I'm happy to help anyone who's got a question about anything we've spoken about today, or anything family law related at all.
Yeah, yeah.
Divorce, children disputes, all of that kind of thing we cover as well.
I was going to ask you about that actually. So
Yeah,
with Myosin's, you guys cover the full range of things
we
really with your
do.
child arrangements and
Yes, yeah, yeah. So most of our work is split between divorcing couples, so sorting out their finances, and then issues to do with children, and the fertility law comes under that. So it'll be typically disputes about where children shall live, or how much contact they'll have with one parent or both parents. what should happen at school holidays, that kind of thing. We do also advise on prenuptial agreements, postnuptial agreements. That we sort of span the whole range of family law, really. Yeah, so if anyone's got any questions at all, if they're thinking of separating or have separated, and they just need a steer on what they do next with potentially divorce or sorting out what they do with their finances, or they've got immediate financial needs and they're worried about how they're going to be able to afford to pay their bills because perhaps someone's left them in difficulty, they're the sorts of questions we get a lot of, and we can always help. But yeah, full range of family law problems. And then as a firm, generally we work on the private client side as well. So we have solicitors who will prepare wills, lasting powers of attorney. We've got company and corporate lawyers. We have employment lawyers if you've got problems at work or employers have got problems. Litigation generally, so commercial disputes. Yeah, so the whole range. The only things we don't cover, just so you know, we cover everything apart from crime and personal injury. They're quite specialised and tend to be standalone firms, but we do pretty much everything else.
That's brilliant.
Yes.
Right, brilliant. Well, you all know where to go then. So,
absolutely.
So, Nicola, I'll pop your links at the end of this podcast anyway, but thank you so much for all your help today and answering all my many questions that popped into my head during that. Sorry.
No problem at all. It's fine. Anytime.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode of My Bump2Baby's Expert Podcast. If you've got any questions on this subject, all contact details are at the bottom of this podcast. My Bump2Baby is one of the UK's leading parenting platforms. You can find local pregnancy to preschool groups, classes and lessons wherever you are in the UK. Not only that, but you can read our honest reviews on the latest products, days out and services that you as parents need to know about. We also work with trusted financial advisors, family law solicitors and now estate agents too. If you would like to find your nearest trusted expert, head over to www.mybump2baby.com.